Hello everyone, this is Steve Hess from OpenBOM. Welcome to today's webinar on what is a bill of materials and why is it important.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, this is Steve Hess from OpenBOM. Great, I would like to thank everybody for joining. There's a few people still coming in. Here we go. Okay, so today's topic is part of our Back to Basics series on what is a bill of materials and why is it important. Today's topic, we're going to try to keep it to under 30 minutes or less. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. What we will be, today's webinar will be a discussion again about what is a bill of materials and why it's important. I will include there'll be a little demo at the end where we'll do a live demo on a small part. And today's, this is not intended to be a deep dive into manufacturing theory or anything else. It's just supposed to be a thoughtful discussion about why BOMs are important to you and your company. And to the best of my ability, this will be a marketing-free event. So the chat is open. If you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and type them in as we go. So as always, I'd like to start with a few definitions: bill of material, part number, part, property. These are all the kind of words that we'll be using in today's discussion. You can dive into those a little bit deeper if you want. Most interestingly, though, we will be developing sort of our own definition of bill of materials and something that's a little more general and something easier to talk about within your company. So, and the other things there, a part we often refer to as an item. Property is sort of you might think of a property as a column in your bill of material, or column header. So moving along, what are we going to do today? Today's discussion is going to be sort of an ask and answer approach. We're going to ask ourselves, what is a bill of material? And we're not necessarily interested in the academic Wikipedia definition. Again, we're more interested in what is a bill of material and what does it mean to your company or to you or your company. Yeah, we all know it's a list, okay, and we're going to build a list, but we want to think about it. How do we arrive at that? We're just not going to sit down and start pounding columns and items into Excel. We're going to be a little more thoughtful about it. And why is it important? Well, again, that one just seems obvious. But the answer is so we can make our product. But again, what are the things that go into that? What's important about making our product? Who needs to be in the loop? Quality obviously is one of the most important things. Should be. We want to make the right product. So the bill of material accuracy leads directly to quality at the end. So again, some upfront thoughtfulness is what we're going to be promoting here today. So here's some classic definitions of what a bill of material is. We're not going to dive into all of these, but you can see that a variety of different companies or organizations have their own definitions of bills of material. But mostly they're all going to kind of come together saying it's a list of stuff that goes into the making of your product. And that's in the end, that's what we're going to come up with, is a list of stuff that goes in our product. But we're going to do it having spent some time thinking about it and what belongs in there, so that we don't overlook anything and we don't include a lot of information that just isn't important. So I do, at the end of this presentation, there's some links to some other references. I do encourage you to kind of poke around and think about, poke around the interweb and think about, your definition of your bill of material, and it'll help socialize the discussion within your organization. And the discussion about what a bill of material is really should come down to what are the requirements of your process, and what's the useful definition. Sure, there's the academic definition of bill of material, but what's our useful definition of a bill of material going to be, and how do we arrive there? Well, we take a look inward and we say, what are the requirements of our process? And this is another one of those cases where I recommend you put pencil to paper and just start writing these down. Again, no reason to type this into Excel or anywhere else. Just start capturing some of these ideas, maybe with your colleagues. At the top are a few of the obvious ones. How many of which item are needed in my process or to build my product? And there might be some sub-assemblies along the way. There might be an order of operations that needs to take place. That's something that my downstream manufacturing guys are certainly going to want to know. Maybe not important to the planning people, the people doing the purchasing, but certainly important to the manufacturing or assembly guys. It's always nice to know what the parts look like. Today's bills of material are generally more easily understood when they include an image of the part. So that's sometimes, I know with Excel, that's something that's kind of hard to do. I'm going to show you an example with SolidWorks BOM here in a few moments that captures all those images. And then there's a lot of other things. So I'll let you read through the list, but what the things I'd like to point out are there second operations? Are there manufacturing specific pieces of information? What CNC machine does this particular item run on in my organization? Does someone down near in the manufacturing need a specification for the type of paint that's going to go on this on our product? How do I include that in my bill of materials so that when it arrives 2 or 3 weeks later down the process, so that paint spec, the right paint spec, is available? And of course, how much do I pay or sell something for? Cost is always a component of bills of material quite often. And finally, where are the locations? Is there a bin location in my company? Is it located in building 2 on shelf number 11? Those type of things. What is the information that's going to be needed through your process? And I find that something, drawing a flow chart of needs along the way can often be helpful in arriving at this list of requirements that they're going to feed into your bill of material. So, having gone through that, I want to offer up a definition, our definition of bill of materials, and I'd like us to think about that as a list of materials, information, and quantities that are required in our process or in a process. It's pretty simple. So, materials, information, and quantities that are required in the process. Again, a flow chart of your manufacturing process can help you arrive at this. So, as we often do, we're going to think back to some of the examples that we've used in earlier webinars. Again, I like the skateboard because it's a simple, familiar product that has multiple levels and multiple instances of things. And so we're going to lean on that a little bit. I'm going to do something a little more complicated in the demo in a few minutes. So this is from last week's webinar, and this is when I'm thinking about our bill of materials. What are some of the specific things that we're going to pieces of information that we're going to need to track about each one of our parts? And there, what we've done, and if you go back and look at webinar number 12, this is number 13 this week. Webinar number 12, we kind of go through a process of, for each one of these parts, how do we identify what pieces of information, what properties we want to manage for those. So again, now we're kind of starting to evolve a little bit more detail here. Again, we're making a list of properties about parts that we'll want to include, and you can see there that maybe we have vendor, maybe we have thumbnail image, and other things that are important in that bill of material. So, finally, after kind of going through this exercise of determining what's important to us, We come up with a skeleton that looks something like this. Again, this is from webinar number 12, and this could certainly be expanded in both axes. But these are the sort of the vital components that will be in our bill of material, and this it kind of goes to that what is a bill of material, answering that question of what is a bill of material. Okay, why is it accurate? Why is an accurate and complete bill of material important? This is our question number 2. Why is it important? And again, it's going to come back to simply put, so that we build the correct product. It's just that simple. And what sort of the 3 steps, the 3 components to building that accurate outcome are: number 1, a thoughtful and complete definition of a BOM. And that may include an item master. We take a look at, there's a couple of webinars, number 2, number 12, which deal with something called item masters, and these are kind of the building blocks that go into a bill of material. But essentially, if we think about this bill of material, it needs to be complete and thoughtful. And the message that I'm trying to send today is thoughtfulness. Spend some time early in the process thinking about properties, particular the properties that are needed in your bill of material, specifications and all these other types of things that we've discussed. So a little bit of a thought up front there. And the next in that BOM template be something that you'll want to reuse in all your bills of material as well, so you'll have some consistency there. So the second thing that determines an accurate outcome is that we have part number and quantity, and essentially and all the other values, but part number and quantity are essential to an accurate bill of material. If you've listened to any of these other webinars, you know that I'm an advocate of a very simple part numbering scheme where the part number doesn't have any meaning. Sometimes referred to as an insignificant part number. And here in this example, you can see I'm using just 100, 200, 300, etc. So not attaching any real significance to that part number. Quantity, of course, super important, and all the other values as well that are going to be passed along down to the rest of our organization. And then finally, one of the most important things here is the availability of this BOM to everyone involved in the process. So how do we get that information out to members in our organization? So we think about this bill of material. We often think about it strictly in the context of manufacturing, but there's a lot of information that others, people in their requirements and requisitions, and of course manufacturing and machining and people that deal with suppliers, etc. Does my product come with some documentation? If it does, maybe that BOM is included as a parts list if I'm creating a manual or some instructions or something for my product, maybe for assembly. So there's a lot of consumers of the data, as well as quite a lot of contributors, people on the supply side that are going to be purchasing these things for inventory, so we can build our skateboards. So thoughtfully architecting the bill of material, getting the information correct, and distributing it through my organization. So in a nutshell, and in 10 minutes, we've covered what is a bill of material and why is it important. So I just want to do a little flashback to a little bit about BOM and item master structure. What this slide is showing, and you can take a look at some of the earlier webinars in a little more detail. But this slide here is showing is that a bill of material is often not just created from the list of parts, maybe from our CAD system or some other place. There is usually a significant amount of business information about each part that's not mastered in my CAD system. And generally speaking, there is an inventory or a catalog or an item master. Those are all referred to the same thing. A list of all the parts that go into all of my products. And then from that list, we determine using creating a bill of material, we identify the usage of those parts. So what this slide is showing is that the item master or catalog generally contains all the detailed information about the part, and it's in a single location so that if the cost or price or the vendor or something, a particular part changes, any bill of material that's using that item will be updated. And so that's our central database, and then we create and construct bills of material, which are simply part number, quantity, and we just discussed how important those are. And then often in the bill of material, there'll be some calculation of the extended cost based on the quantity. So those are the few things that are unique to the bill of material. Most of the other information here shown in blue is going to come from the catalog. And in the example that we're going to do right now, that's what we're going to cover. So we're going to be using the word like catalog and bill of material here in the example. And so I'd like you to kind of refer back to this slide thinking about where the information is stored. Okay. We will jump into a live demo here with, I'm going to use SolidWorks today, and we're going to open a butterfly valve. We're going to go through some settings, add some properties, do the things that we just discussed, go through a typical workflow that we just discussed. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me go ahead and okay. Just giving a moment for the webinar to catch up. Okay, here we are looking at a SolidWorks butterfly valve. This is the type of thing that might be a fuel or air throttle, and very simple part. It has a little bit of structure here on the left and a few parts. And I'm going to use OpenBOM, an online cloud-based bill of material tool, to create first an item master, which is a list of all the parts that are in this design, and then a bill of material, which will account for the usage like we just discussed. First, I'd like to open the settings and point out a few things that I'm going to be doing here. The first of which is there are a number of templates that are used in OpenBOM to create both the catalog and the bill of material. Those are managed here. I'm also going to, in my organization, it's very important to have CAD files and PDFs and drawings and other things available to my downstream manufacturing team. I'm going to use the OpenBOM feature here to collect that information and link it into my bill of materials so that downstream users can have access to it. So I'm going to check that. I'm going to authorize I'm going to use a Google Drive here as my storage, but you can see that there's a number of other options available. And I'm going to create a catalog. So I'm going to do this in real time. There's a little bit of time involved. OpenBOM, the OpenBOM add-in that you see up there at the top, the OpenBOM menu, is going to go through and analyze the SolidWorks assembly, open each one of the parts, extract any properties that are defined in there, create a PDF of the solid model. Also, look around using the SolidWorks process, look around and see if there's an associated drawing for this part, and pick all of those up and send them to my Google Drive. Okay. We can see that that process has completed. That gives you a sense for how long that takes for an assembly of that size. It's about a minute or so. Okay. So what do we have here? We have a catalog, what we refer to as the single source of truth. We have a catalog in OpenBOM that is the list of all the parts that are in that butterfly valve. Now, we've gone through a sort of a thoughtful process that we discussed early in the first couple of slides, and we've decided that there's a couple of pieces of information that are important to my company. And I'm just going to take a second and add some of those in. They are going to be some cost, and we also know that there are some specifications. I'm just going through a process right now of adding properties. And finally, there's something that my company keeps track of internally called process type. Okay, and process type is going to be an indicator to others on my team about where these parts need to be routed. So I'm going to, just for purposes of demonstration, I'm going to fill out some costs quickly, and I'm going to go ahead and add this particular part here is made out of carbon. I think is made out of carbon fiber on this one. I'm going to go ahead and add a specification for that, which I've stored in my Google Drive. There it is. So now people that are downstream consuming this information will be able to click on that and see a specification about that particular material type. Also, I'm also going to indicate that this particular item is built on my CNC machine, and so is this one. These are my process type. And here's another one. Okay, so I've added some information. I've got some specs. I'm not going to fill all these out. I also know that I do have that this product is going to need some paint, so I'm going to add some paint to that, and I'm also going to add a paint spec. I'm grabbing this from my desktop. The other one I already had in Google Drive, but in this particular case, I'm grabbing it from my desktop. So now, as I send this to my guys downstream, they'll be able to open this and read that particular paint spec. Okay, and as you can imagine, you can go ahead and fill the rest of this out. So I've spent a few minutes. You would spend a little bit more time, but we would fill in this catalog with the information and the properties that we defined are important to our company. And now we're going to return back to SolidWorks and actually build a bill of material. And that just could not be easier. We're going to say create BOM. Okay, we give that a second to complete. I see that I'm asking it to send the files again to the cloud. I should have disabled that setting, so bear with me for a second. We'll just let it go ahead and send it. There we go. Send those up there. All right, so let's open the bill of material that we just created. Okay, I've taken a moment to just attach the catalog that we created a few moments ago to our bill of material. And there's some additional information on how this process works. But what I've ended up with here is a bill of material that has a part number, which we know is important. It has a quantity, which came from our CAD design. And I'm referencing a number of the rest of the information is coming from my catalog. I'm just going to do a slight little organization so we can see what this looks like. And you can see that I have a multi-level bill of material here. So let's dive down just a little bit. We'll see that I picked up some machine center information from my CAD system, like this one happens to run on my Haas, and that one runs on my 3-axis. I also understand that some of what the process types are for these that are taking a moment to fill out. I have the cost, came in from my catalog. I know that that was important to my company, so we added that to our catalog. And we have drawings that came through from my CAD system. We know that the machine operators downstream are interested in drawings. And then finally, we have, of course, the links to the specifications that we added as well. And for example, here's our material spec. Okay, so what we've arrived at here is a thoughtful bill of material, linked it into our catalog, which contained all of those bits and pieces that we've identified as being important to our company. Those are across the top here as properties. And then finally, one last thing we want to do is we want to demonstrate that we can view this bill of material. Now, this bill of material has a lot of information in it, and it could have quite a bit more. But we've created a couple of views. Perhaps maybe I've got a view for the people in my planning department. They want to see a very simple part number, cost, quantity on hand list. So I've taken that same set of data. Maybe I've created an engineering view, which has some other information about it, but doesn't necessarily need lead times and specifications and things like that. So, and then finally, I've got the opportunity to share this maybe with a subcontractor. So I'm going to take this chance to share this bill of material with one of my subcontractors. Okay. So I just shared it with an email that I have. And I'm going to go ahead and sign in another browser right now as if I was at another location. I'm signed in as my subcontractor, and the subcontractor sees that bill of material just as we created it. There we go. Now you can see that that perhaps my subcontractor has a certain set of needs, and he or she can create their own views and go ahead and consume the data. So what's important here, the three things that we did, and I want to wrap this up just in a couple of seconds here, is we have let me get back to my presentation here. Okay, let's wrap this up. Couple closing things that I want to point out that are important to you. That should be important to you. Ask yourself and your team what's important to your product's quality within your organization. Turn those requirements into items and properties for your bill of material, and think about them in the context of an item master, a master set that you can reuse. Of course, in OpenBOM, you want to create those BOMs and catalogs, and super important, you want to share this out with your team. And so you want to think about what information is not only needed for me as the author of this bill of material, but for the rest of my team. And then you can of course, control the access and other things, the read-only and other view controls that you have. So, okay, so with that, I'd like to point to a couple of references here. This deck will be shared out with everyone. So there's a couple of places if you want to continue some reading on that. And why don't, since we are running a little long, why don't you just go ahead and send any questions that you might have to support@openbom.com. Again, my name is Steve Hess. I'm the Director of User Experience at OpenBOM, and it's been a pleasure spending some time with you today. So enjoy your day. See you next time. Bye-bye.